Hello, welcome to our worship facility webinar, Accurately Planning from the Future. I'm Gene Lass, editor of Worship Facility. With me today is Patrick Hart, Facility Stewardship Specialist for Smart Church Solutions. So Patrick, I think what we're talking about today is planning for the future in terms of 5-10 years out, knowing what maintenance you're going to have to do, planning for that, but also planning for the growth of your church so that you're not caught flat-footed.
That's pretty much it, Gene. Yeah.
Well, we can wrap
yeah.
then, that's
We're good. In my world, I perform facilities condition assessments around the country, and the idea behind that is to help churches understand the baseline of where they're at. And if you're going to plan for a new construction project or remodeling, if you don't understand clearly where you're at, you're really going to have a hard time going forward into the future. And a lot of times the facilities manager is not brought into the conversation until that ball is way down the field. And so I'm hoping that through this and the other means, we can help the facility managers out there, and we prefer the term facility steward because you're caring for that facility, that you're going to help share with your leadership the tools and the things that you have at as your own resource to help them move the ball down the field in a way that's better stewardship in the long run.
I know that doing a facility assessment is key. Do you think that's something that people should do annually, independently of facility steward?
There's ways to do it independently. It's a pretty in-depth process the way we do it. We encourage people, if they want to take the time, we offer a tool called the Facilities Health Assessment that's a bit, it's self-directed. We provide a website where they can log in and they can answer some questions. A lot of the data that we ask for ahead of time, they'll be filling that in. And then the things that we look for when we're on site, they'll be getting that data themselves. A lot of people get into that and they realize that's a lot of effort. It's a big, heavy lift. And then they call us in and we do an assessment. So we've tried to make it accessible, but having somebody come in with fresh eyes is really a good idea.
Yeah, I know I've seen that tool on your site, and that's a great thing where you can enable people to assess what they have themselves. But just as with anything else, if you're working at your church day in, day out for months or years at a time, you don't notice things anymore. You've gotten too close to the situation, and yeah, you should bring in someone else who's wondering what's going on there, how long has it been that way, and did you know?
Yeah, and a lot of times you notice the first thing. You notice a crack in the concrete, or you notice a missing piece of tile or something, and then you haven't fixed it, and months go by, and you just don't realize it's there anymore. It's interesting because one of the things that really plays into what we're talking about today is we have several architecture firms that contract with us at Smart Church Solutions to perform facilities condition assessments on behalf of their clients. And I think that's really innovative because it gets us out there, it gets us to get that baseline for them. And then they use the information that we gather to help them plan a project. And then, so they're taking the church leadership by the hand and taking them through. And instead of saying, oh, you've got a $5 million budget for a remodel, they might say, hey, wait, you've got $2 million in deferred maintenance. So how are we going to address some of those things as part of your project and take care of them? Or are you just going to have a $3 million remodel? So they know what they're going in, as opposed to just blowing it and then finding out you now, you got to replace 20 HVAC units and you don't have money. And so that's pretty innovative. I think it's a great idea, and we've done a lot of that work. And so I hope that churches would say, hey, that's a really good idea, even before you get the architect involved. But the architects can be there to help hold their hand and guide those projects in a way that that they can address some of the concerns that are raised in an assessment.
That the point about deferred maintenance, I think, is key, where that becomes a snowball effect problem at a lot of facilities. Is you're trying to get to this, you may not have time or money to get to a problem, but you know it's there, and then suddenly there's another one and there's another one, and you have to deal with it. How do you think people should deal with that before it becomes a super problem, and how would you prioritize?
Well, okay, so that's a really good question, Gene, because a lot of times we might know it's there, but we act like an ostrich. We ignore that it's there, or our leadership ignores that it's there. You could be raising that flag and they're like, nope. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, and we can talk about that. Deferred maintenance is is a huge issue in churches. Churches need to realize that they have a commercial building. It may be the house of God, but it is a commercial building with the same responsibilities as any other commercial building out there, whether it's a school, a hospital, it has big equipment that you don't have in your house. And so you can't treat it just like your house. It has to be treated in a commercial level with commercial vendors. You can't fix everything with a guy who's good with a wrench.
Yeah.
There's some of that is good stewardship, but there's other times you want to be maintaining things well. And so let's get into that a little bit. I can go through the steps of what it takes when I show up at a church to do a FCA, and how that will benefit the church in the long run as they're making those plans for the future. You think that sounds like a plan?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, let's see if we can get into that. All right, so defining your future ministry by assessing current conditions. So what does that really mean? So the intention here is how a condition assessment will provide the foundation for your future planning, how those plans can affect current and future custodial and maintenance staffing levels, and how to address deferred maintenance issues, which you already raised as a concern, and deficiencies as part of remodeling or facility expansion, and then how to utilize life cycle planning, because you have to be able to forecast that budget, not just for your current facility, but whatever you're going to put into place. So what is a facility condition assessment? This is a nutshell: an evaluation of your church facility's current and projected conditions. It's where you're at. Where are we today? And I don't cast judgment. I just go in and I tell them the way it is. And that feels really hard coming from a facilities management perspective, where I did that for 14 years. I'm just there to tell you what I see. And I mentioned, we work with architectural firms. I just completed an assessment. I think it was in January. I was on site, and we were just meeting with the client this past week, and they said, "Wow, we had been on site, and we thought this place was in great shape." And I say, "Overall, it is," but they hadn't noticed all the things I pointed out that they agree are issues that need to be addressed. And so it's just having that fresh eyes approach. It's hard to evaluate yourself. Sometimes it's good to bring in a partner.
Is that something where you get pushback sometimes? Maybe they feel a personal attachment to their facility, saying, "Well, you think I was doing a bad job," or
that's interesting, because I was afraid when I got into this a year ago that I would get pushback from the facility managers, because they're often not the ones that hire us. It's their boss, the business administrator or the executive pastor. And my goal there is not to bring up stuff and say, "Hey, you failed to do this." The goal is to assist them in their ministry and to point out to the leadership that they are not equipped to do the task at hand. They're understaffed, they're underfunded, there's too much work to be done, too much has been left undone. You don't give them the funding or the time, and seeing it laid out bare in front of you. I think once the facility manager's on board, they share everything with me. We walk through and they're showing me the little secrets that they know about. And so I can highlight them in a way, as some third party. I come in and now their pastor's looking at it and says, "Wow, I just never realized." And when you see, let's say take storage. Storage is always a big issue in churches. They always say they don't have enough storage. Architects will tell you churches have enough storage, they just waste the space. So I take pictures of every area that's being used for storage. If I put 10 pictures in a condition assessment and they're all overcrowded, stacked to the ceiling, it's clear that you're not going to be able to find anything. So people are going to go buy stuff again. And that's a bad stewardship. They're going to buy it again. They're going to shove it in a closet. Churches post-COVID have taken classrooms that are no longer being used, and they're just dumping stuff in them as storage space. And so I can put all those pictures out and say, "Hey, you really need to get a handle on your storage, because it's inhibiting your ability to A, use ministry space, and B, utilize the things that you think you're saving for the future." I get that you're going to save your Christmas decorations But every little thing, every piece of foam, every piece of cardboard, it doesn't need to be saved. There may be another church that wants to use what you use. The church I worked at had a school associated with it that did a large middle school musical every year. And so if we did something big where we built set pieces, we would contact other schools that were going to do that same production and share some of that costuming and set pieces. So we didn't have to hang on to set pieces that would be painted over again a year later. We just dispersed them out into the community for someone else to use. And so the designers got to see their stuff, their gifts used in another venue as well. So there's always somewhere to do it. So anyway, evaluating your church, finding out where your baseline is. So what is a facilities condition assessment? What's it going to do? It's going to help church leadership understand their physical conditions of the building. They may not realize the condition it's at. And a lot of times, again, it's hard to share that as the staff person. Having someone else come in and show a lot of pictures that demonstrate it for you, I think is a good idea. It will identify current and projected deferred maintenance. We look at all kinds of things. If I do a 100,000 square foot church, I'll probably take 700 to 1,000 pictures.
Wow.
I don't put all those into the assessment, but I look back at those pictures. Something catches my eye. I take a picture of it. I'm looking back at it as I'm putting the report together, and I say, these are the ones I'm going to use to demonstrate this thing that's a common theme throughout their facility. How clean are the restrooms? Well, it doesn't take 100 pictures of toilets to demonstrate that their cleaning level needs to be stepped up. If there's a lot of nicks and scrapes in the walls, well, they don't have time, or they're not addressing those things. Or the ceiling vents, are they clean? Is that even on somebody's radar to clean ceiling vents? And what impact does that have on your HVAC system if it's full of dust and those kind of things? So I can put all that together and then say, hey, here's some of this stuff that's it's not been done. We then benchmark your current operational expenses, your utilities, your spend on custodial things, including paper products. How much do you spend on maintenance? How much staffing, dollar-wise for custodial, dollar-wise for maintenance, and how many people, how many full-time equivalent hours do you have in each of those categories? And we benchmark that against other churches across the country, where we did a survey in 2020 that helps us find out where's the average. And in terms of staffing for both facilities maintenance and custodial, the sweet spot average within church body is 1 full-time equivalent for every 35,000 square feet. So you have a 100,000 square foot church, you're looking at about almost 3 full-time employees, and that does not include the facilities manager. So technically you'd be looking at 6 full-time employees, because you'd have 3 on the custodial side and 3 on the facility side. Our benchmarking study also demonstrated that, and again, self-reporting by churches, that on the maintenance side, their facilities maintenance techs are being called off task up to 50% of the time. So that in 50% of their time, they are not performing the tasks that they have set before them. That doesn't mean they're not doing anything. It doesn't mean they're just playing ping pong in the youth room. It means that somebody said, oh, can you do that setup for me? Oh, can you drive the school bus? Because you got CDL and I need you to take somebody over the whatever group needs to go somewhere, and you get to drive the bus. Oh, can you do that setup? Can you go get the mail and take all those boxes? Can you move that roll of paper in the workroom for me? Can you unload the paper? Can you go to the Home Depot and pick up whatever? So 50% of your time is off task, which then means even if you had 3 employees at 100,000 square feet, you're still understaffed, or you need to find efficiencies that remove that and help close that gap. On the custodial side, it's they're off task 40% of the time, because they're not being called off to go do all those setup things. They might be called off to clean up something else that wasn't in the set plan. Somebody spilled something, something's broken, clean up some glass, whatever. So they're being pulled away. But a lot of times the custodial folks are not there at the same time when you're going to get that drive-by. It's a get called off task. But it's an effect that we want them to take into account. It's hard to tell if you don't go on site. When I'm on site and I can see the rhythm and I can see the level of activity in a church, then I can kind of tell, yeah, this is affecting you, this off-task nature. I was at a church recently that they were doing everything right. They were well-staffed, and they had achieved the efficiencies that we would normally recommend to get them closer to that 1 in 35,000. So they were like at 2.9 for the size of their facility, 2.9 full-time equivalent in maintenance. And even though with that off task, I just didn't think I think they were getting it done, because I could see it. Hard to do if I don't show up on site and tell it. And a self-reporting thing would be hard for them too. But that doesn't mean I didn't find things wrong in their church. And it was an amazing church, but there was still some deferred maintenance. It also assists in development of capital budgets. So what's our current capital needs? What are we going to be needing in the future? I don't know if in my 14 years as a facilities manager, anybody ever asked me to forecast beyond the current year. I could have given them the data, they didn't necessarily want it. It also helps prioritize your resources, both financial and human resources. Why do you need a facilities condition assessment? Right here. Your ministry facility has been entrusted to you. You must be proactive in stewarding the assets, including the facility and everything inside of it. That means tables, chairs, things get broken. That you can't just keep putting out broken tables. Somebody's got to either fix it or replace it before somebody gets injured. There's all kinds of things in today's litigious world that we need to be aware of. Safety, security. You don't want to be sued because somebody tripped over a broken curb in the parking lot, or cut their hand open on a table when they came in for a youth meeting. So it's pretty all encompassing. And when you think about the Levites were the first facilities managers, and they managed the tabernacle, which was relatively small in comparison to most of our churches today. But there was over 5,000 Levites, but they were doing everything. They were making tent stakes and ropes and making all the robes for the priests. And they were there to assist the priesthood. That's what we do. We're there to assist ministry people. And you can't if you don't know where you're at, where your baseline is. So here's what's involved when I come on site. We have a pre-visit data collection, send out a form that asks them for some specific things. We want to know their total square footage. Square footage helps us determine how long we're going to have to be on site. We want to know the age of their roof of each of their buildings on their campus, so that we know when was the last time you addressed this. And then we know, based on the type of roofing, how long it should last. And then we can look at it and see the condition once we get eyes on it. We ask for their staffing levels for both custodial and maintenance. We ask for their spend in custodial, utilities, and maintenance. And we ask them if they have a capital reserve budget where they're actually setting money aside every year. They provide that before we go on site. Then I show up and I visit and I collect more data. I look at all of the HVAC equipment that I can find, any water heaters. We look at the roof, we look at the parking, and the big three are parking, HVAC, and roofing. Yep. Those are the ones that you spend more money on anything else, and they have this pretty quick turnaround timeline. So the average piece of HVAC equipment's expected life is 15 years. Well, if you have a piece of equipment that's 40 years old, you're well beyond that 15-year life expectancy. And it doesn't mean you can't make them last that long with the right maintenance and things. They can last a long time, but you need to be prepared the moment that it fails or it becomes a money pit. And what happens when you show up on Sunday morning and the HVAC unit, you're not heating or cooling, and you're 6 months out on even ordering a piece, and it's a $150,000 piece of equipment, and you got to do the big ask. So knowing and having the money set aside and being ready for those days and being able to plan for it effectively is important. Then we develop a written assessment and include the deferred maintenance and capital needs projections that we put in so we can cost out over a 15-year period, give them an idea where they're going. We benchmark their facility spending and staffing against other churches from our benchmarking study. And we do life cycle calculations and a capital replacement projection. So we take those big three We might add in a couple projects if they're big, like I've done a couple churches where they had windows that were installed in the 50s and they're totally inefficient and they're losing a lot of energy. And they, by investing in the new windows, not only do they increase building security and comfort for their employees, but they're going to get some energy savings out of it. So we'll put that in as a capital project. So they can cost that out and go, well, at what point can we, can we take a bite out of that apple? Staffing considerations. We will do a review of their current staffing level. We will assess how their future plans will affect staffing levels. So let's say I did a church recently that I showed up and I did not know that they had just added 20,000 square feet to the church. It was in process. They actually got a whole bunch of used portable classrooms for their school, and they all put them together in these two big rows. So I think there was a total of 18 of these these portable classrooms. It was 20,000 square feet. That's now got to be taken into consideration for their how much are they going to spend on utilities? They don't know, but it was all electric. Are you planning on adding custodial staff because you just added 20,000 feet, and how many bathrooms that are being used by a bunch of high school students? So they're going to need to be cleaned every day. So as you budgeted for that, you went and you got used school buildings. You brought in a contractor to clean it up and make it look good and clean the carpet. But now, are you ready to move forward into the future with that? Oh wow, we didn't budget for it. No, but they were planning ahead and they had set that. But we help you figure that out. Assist in development of strategies for adjusting staffing levels to accommodate future plans. So even just knowing that 1 in 35,000, or knowing that there's the likelihood of being called off task, or hey, what are the strategies we can help you with to minimize that lost time? And one of them would be we offer eSpace software, which either is going to help you with scheduling or work order management, and it's just going to make the communication better with people that need a work order, as opposed to a post-it note on something that says this is broken, and then weeks later you finally see that somebody put a note on something and they're wondering why it never got fixed, and you're wondering why they never told you about it. And so getting rid of all that lag is just creating better efficiencies within your facilities and within your staffing. What are the hidden costs of your future plans? Identifying hidden costs like deferred maintenance. What about code compliance? We were talking with a big camp in the Midwest, and they said, we just recently added, we wanted to do a remodel on some building, and they had to add fire sprinklers. I'm like, oh, well, what did that cost? And they said it cost $3 million.
Wow.
I was blown away. I was like, well, how did it cost $3 million to add sprinklers? And they said, well, because they said, oh, your well system here isn't going to be able to pump enough to run that sprinkler system in that facility. So you're going to need to be on city water. Oh, okay. So they had to now get connected to city water. Then they said, oh, because you did that, now you have to connect all of your buildings to city water. And this camp could sleep like 500 people. So there are a lot of buildings. So they said, okay, now they had to connect all the buildings. And they said, oh, by the way, now that you're on city water, you have to all be on city sewer. Okay, so now they had to connect, and so by the time they got all in, they were millions into it for a project that really shouldn't have been that bad. But they had to be code compliant, and they didn't know that until they were in the middle of the project. So we can help you scope that out. Finding energy efficiencies. Oh, hey, you might have a 50-year-old HVAC unit, a boiler or something, but it's incredibly inefficient. You're spending a lot more on utilities. And the new equipment is a lot smaller too. Say, create some extra space around there. There may be hidden damage in a facility that you don't realize that could be addressed as you're going down and building a new facility. That you're going to have contractors on site that can take care of that. And the life cycle costs, knowing where you're at in the life cycle of your current equipment, but also what's the life cycle going to be of the equipment that is on your new construction project. And how can you find, like, oh, in my current building, we know that this particular piece of equipment, we weren't happy with it from the beginning. it failed regularly, and maybe we want to go with something different. And so just doing a better job of planning so that you can maintain whatever's going on. You don't just go back to the same thing you've done before. And developing strategies for minimizing and addressing those hidden costs. We can help walk through that. The architects, that's really the gold in that situation, is they're there to help take the report and say, okay, now how do we work with this? We'll walk through somebody and we unpack it all. And we provide some other tools to help them, but having an architect really walk you through on that and saying, okay, here's how we can address this from our end is really a lifesaver. And then how can you learn from the past and prevent repeating what hasn't worked well? So maybe you used a bad roofing membrane, something you didn't like. It didn't last long given your weather conditions. Well, what can you do differently? I recently got back from a church where they have some roofing issues, and I had suggested that they might want to find some kind of a roof coating that they could put over the top. And they texted their roofer, and he was vehemently against any kind of a coating on the roof. I don't know whether he doesn't use roof coatings. So I reached out to a roofer, and I'm like, hey, what would you suggest in these situations? And he gave some ideas. And so I was able to pitch that back. I was able to send back some research that said, hey, look into these areas, because this would be a less expensive way to solve your problem going forward and might buy you 20 years time. And with a lot less cost. And so just knowing what's out there, not just relying on your vendor to tell you what they want you to do, but being able to develop that relationship and work with them and say, okay, we saw this didn't really work in the past. So how can we together move to something better in the future?
That sounds like an excellent example too, where you're getting past the whole pushback that you might encounter, where maybe they're having a vendor tell them one thing and you're telling them you could save money and extend the life of what you've got going on if you do this. So that way it's working for everybody, and you're giving them the data that they need.
Yeah, and they're going to make the choice. That's the beauty in what I do. I can tell you the bad news, and I try to tell you in a way that helps you motivate to take care of it. But if you don't, I have no investment in that. I feel bad. It brings me joy to talk to somebody where I see that they're taking action on what we have said and suggested. And we don't tell you how to resolve it. We just say, you need to replace your roof. And we may offer suggestions. And we're very open about being available to people to have the dialogue and give them ideas. And we share within our own community, our own eSpace user groups and people that have done assessments. They're all on Facebook and places like that, where in fact, we created a new thing called community eSpace, because we've got to do the E thing. But now people can go in and they can pose a question, and the community can share in how to resolve it for them. And sometimes that has something to do with our products. So they suggest a new thing that we could add, a new feature, and then the community can help shake out whether that's worth the time and effort for us to do it, or, oh no, there's another way, I got to work around for that. And so that's really cool. It takes the pressure off us, but the same way, there's so many people out there with great ideas. Don't just trust the guy that's taking your money.
Yeah.
Take the time to build relationships with those people and help them understand what your process is. And say, here's where we're going. We can't just throw money at it. We need to be good stewards of it, and finding good vendors who understand stewardship. That's gold right there. How do you address deferred maintenance issues and deficiencies? Okay, so deferred maintenance, what is it? It's postponed repairs, replacements, or maintenance tasks. Equipment that has been used well beyond its intended life cycle. You're waiting for it to fail. Well, when it does, you better be ready, because it's going to take months in today's environment. What causes it? Lack of funding, insufficient maintenance staffing. You can't keep up with it. Competing priorities, which often as a facilities manager, I don't get a say in what those priorities are. Neglect. You just let it go. You can't be bothered. We're gonna wait. What are those consequences? Over time, it leads to larger, more expensive problems. Nothing is going to get cheaper by ignoring it. It's just going to get more expensive and more expensive. 3, 4, 5, 7 times more expensive. It's just crazy the amount of money we can throw at something if we just don't take a $10 problem and end up with a $10,000 solution is not good stewardship. And it can lead to reduced functionality, increased safety risk, and a decline in the overall condition and the value of your facility, especially if you're looking to like borrow against the facility or anything like that. Insurance companies want to know that your building is being maintained. You could lose your insurance if you are not taking care of your facility. So we'll point out some of those things too in the report. We would point out safety issues. I can think of one that was just really blatant. I walked into a publicly accessible stairway, and it had the ladder going up to the roof hatch, and there was no gate on the ladder to prohibit anyone from walking in the stairway and climbing up the ladder. So you could fall off and then fall down 2 flights of stairs. So safety risk for sure. Some huge liability there. And it was right near the youth area. So I'm thinking this probably should have already happened. But then I climbed up to get up the hatch, and there's no lock on the roof hatch. I mean, these are 2 really easy things to resolve, but that could have cost you somebody's significant physical injury or a lawsuit that would bankrupt the church. And so you put a gate on, you can make it out of plywood and a padlock, but a padlock on the roof hatch, essential. You don't need somebody up messing with your HVAC units or jumping off the road. Life cycle planning. So what is that? It's the strategic process that involves assessing the useful life of a building systems. We know in general how long each item is supposed to last. You can always look at their warranty period too. That kind of is a good clue that it's probably not likely to last in today's world, much beyond that. I do know from experience, you can make things last longer than that expected life, but you need to be prepared to either replace components or plan for their eventual replacement, or in the case of things like carpet, renewal. We're going to recarpet that room. We say carpet can age out, it can ugly out. Sometimes it uglies out before it ages out. I try not to be judgmental about what the carpet looks like. I see some that was laid in the 90s that's perfectly clean, but it just doesn't look right. But it's very seldom you're going to find something laid in 1990 that doesn't have runs in it or some stains, or just it's beat down and worn looking, and say, hey, you know what? That's just time for a little renewal. Okay, steps. Assessment of the remaining useful life of your HVAC, roofing, parking, and plumbing equipment. Plumbing equipment meaning water heaters, boilers, that kind of systems, so that we can figure out how much time you got left. And then using that to prioritize, you can decide, oh, what's most critical, what's the cost, and what's the impact on operations as we deal with those things. What's going to be the impact if we have to replace the HVAC unit on the worship center? How do we work around that so it's the least amount of impact on our membership? What's the most critical? If you operate a school, you're 9 months, 10 months of the year, and you got to shut down some HVAC equipment, but you also need to provide fresh air. Well, how do you do that? How do you find the ways of doing these things during a spring break, or squeeze things into the summer, or oh, hey, something just crashed. Well, it's going to be mission critical to replace whatever's wrong with the unit on the worship center, or the roof leaks on the worship center. It's funny how quickly you can get on those things. And then you can then develop your budgeting based on your prioritization, and then begin to implement that plan. We offer a life cycle calculator tool. It's part of our eSpace software suite, but when I do a FCA, I build them the life cycle calculator that they can have access to, even if they're not an eSpace user. And I put all of their equipment that I detail, and I load it up into the calculator, and then I show them how to access it, and they can download it to spreadsheets, and they can sort it, but they can see over time the impact of every one of those dollars and what it means going forward. And you can enter how much they're setting aside for capital reserve budgeting every year, what kind of an inflationary factor they feel is manageable or correct in their setting. And they can even add in how much interest they might be getting on the money that they do have in the bank. And so that they can calculate that out over time. They can also then see the negative side of that is, oh, we got a bunch of equipment that's 15 years past life. And so it's already this pot that needs to be spent. currently, but your equipment's still working. So you got a little time to save up that. So to break that into steps and figure out how we're going to meet that out over time. All righty. So this is what a basic assessment looks like, pretty basic, but got a clickable table of contents. And you'll see here, we've got all kinds of things like we've got an executive summary that's going to kind of set it up and tell them, hey, here's the major things we saw that was a theme throughout the campus. Here's some fresh eyes, things that I noticed when I arrived that you might not be seeing, but it explains our approach. Campus observations, that's really just like, hey, what was the weather like when I got here? What was I able to access? Did Google get me there directly? Are your visitors to your church actually going to be able to find the entry point to your church by using a navigation system?
Excellent question.
Operational considerations, that was the one that we end up with this chart that tells you where you're doing in comparison to others with your utilities, your custodial, your general maintenance, your annual reserve funding, and then breaks it down by maintenance side and your custodial side for where you're at staffing wise. So you can see this one's like 1.5 because of the 50% reduction in on task, or the 0.2 on custodial, which is pretty good. And then we can go. The other big one is the let's see, deferred maintenance. So the deferred maintenance list here, it lists out all these HVAC units that are beyond expected life. It lists out, oh, you got to do parking lot repairs in your north parking lot. Oh, you got to, restripe it. And the list just goes on. We do immediate need. We do 1 to 5 year. We do 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 years. So you can track over 15 years, and you'll see that like resurfacing your parking lot shows up every 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a significant cost, but you need to do it every 5 years, or you're going to have an even greater cost having to tear up and redo your parking lot. So as you can see here, over 15 years, they're looking at $3.4 million of deferred maintenance and projects. And what we do is we take that and say, okay, divide that out over each year. Now, how much do you need to get the funds if you broke it down by a yearly basis? And then we look at their square footage. And on average, you need if you set aside $1 per square foot, you're going to be setting aside $100,000 a year. So in the case of somewhere like this, they're going to need to be in the 250 range, maybe, to be able to cover it, to catch their immediate need, which is pretty significant. It's 2/3 of that is immediate need, and then everything else becomes easier. But so that's really what we do. The pictures you can see here, we talked about storage and maintenance. That's the maintenance shops in a particular space. Here we talk about custodial. I look at the custodial closets, make some observations about how clean their facility is. We look at their first aid kits and determine, hey, are they full of expired items? Are your AED batteries expired? Are the pads expired? It takes 6 months to get a new AED device. It's like, oh, are you inspecting your fire extinguishers monthly? This is required by OSHA in most places. Most people aren't doing it. And you could have a volunteer do that. Is your mechanical rooms, are they empty? They shouldn't be full of stuff. Here's storage. You see all kinds of places. Like, okay, it's like my college dorm room.
Oh, that's great.
Great. It's hard to ignore this when it's visually put before you. Toilets, I have take a lot of pictures of toilets, which feels weird, but it really helps you point out where things aren't getting clean, where the concentration is, so you can say, hey, it's time for training. Even if you have an outsourced vendor, how do we get to that point where they're training and cleaning to the level that you need it? And this one gets me every time. There's always an ice maker in a church, and they all have a sign that says, be sure to wash your hands and only use this scoop to get ice. The idea being that you're not going to contaminate the ice. And then every time I open it up and I take a couple pictures, and there's all kinds of organic growth inside the ice
Oh.
maker. And that's even when they're cleaning it regularly. I mean, you have to follow the procedures from the manufacturer, but you point that out and you're like, okay. And it's not that it's anybody's doing their job wrong. It's just they don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So there's a lot goes into it. Self-assessment, that's why that's a challenge, because you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a great tool and a great visual for people to see what it would be like if they did that, or what they should be looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I think it was a great informative topic here, and I think you had your name and your contact information on there in case people have questions for you. As always, if people have questions for me, they can send them to glass@worshipfacility.com, and I'll either answer them myself or forward them on to you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for having me, Gene.
Thank you.